Good morning, everyone. My name's Jeff Prosek. I'm a second-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and welcome to the Changing Nature of Media Rights panel. We have a fantastic group of panelists up here this morning. Richard Deitch from Sports Illustrated will be moderating. We have Jeannie Buss from the Los Angeles Lakers, Bob Bowman from Major League Baseball Advanced Media, Frank Golding from YouTube, which is part of Google, and lastly, Ed Durso from ESPN. The way this panel will work, it's going to go till 10 a.m. We're going to try to leave about 15 minutes at the end, as in all the other panels that you've probably been at the conference so far, for questions. You can text or tweet those questions in, and we'll get those questions to Richard to ask at the end. If you're texting those in, you text it to the number 22333, as if that's a contact number or a phone number that you're texting. Start those texts with media rights, and then we'll know which panel that goes to. If you're tweeting them in, it's at poll, at P-O-L-L. Again, start it with media rights if you could, and then your question, and please include hashtag SSAC14. With that, I'll kick it over to Richard.
Thank you, man. Forgive me for my voice. I'm just back from Sochi. I think they bugged my immune system as well as my laptop. So. All right, this is for the panel, who needs no introduction. Obviously, there's some pretty amazing people on this group, and we thank you for being here. I know, like, you two and the Beatles are in the other room, so this is cool. For all of you, what is the most impressive sports media rights deal you've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, and why? Let's start with you, Jeannie.
And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's the LA Dodgers deal in Los Angeles. You know, the Lakers had signed a pretty attractive deal with Time Warner to launch an RSN, and then a few months later, the Dodgers even made our number seem small. So that was pretty impressive to me.
Bob?
Yeah, I think that's worth noting and seeing how that plays out. But I think the one that your company just announced the other day, 120 Sports, over-the-top programming with 3 leagues and a bunch of other, like NASCAR and PGA and things like that. That will be interesting to see if that can truly develop into a powerhouse with over-the-top programming.
It's good to be working with the smart guys, Bob. Thank you.
I would add assuming it goes through the Time Warner Comcast merger, that's going to create a behemoth, and there's a lot of sports programming on there, and that's a significant player in how they're going to deliver sports.
And Ed, I'm really interested in your answer because you are at a place that does deals all the time.
Yeah, in thinking about the question, I think the one that comes to my mind, it's sort of a little bit of a commercial, but from our standpoint, what we've done
consumers or interested parties look to see the increases in airtime over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, the proposition is out there, and it suggests that there's not an inexhaustible supply, but obviously we've never underestimated the appetite, sort of the American public for sports, and we've been able to create our own set of 5, 6, 7 channels, plus ESPN3. So I don't think that there's a big end in sight, although it is interesting to watch the breakdown of all that, what's happening in the professional leagues in terms of not only regional networks, but now single team and single city networks. So you're seeing the disaggregation of the total into smaller and smaller slices, and we've obviously seen that as we've gone out to acquire rights. So I don't think that there's not enough. I think there's plenty. I think we're also beginning to see coming on board now in a much, much bigger way are European sports, soccer. For us, for example, on ESPN3, cricket has got an enormous following. So we're bringing new stuff in at the same time while the existing sort of U.S. plate is being divvied up into, I think, smaller and smaller slices, which I think if you're a sports fan, it's never been a better time to be around. It's available on multiple platforms, it's available in increasing amounts on broadband, so I think it's a good time to be in the business. I think it's a good time to be a fan.
Frank, you want to add to that?
So there's roughly about 140 sports in the world that people follow. And we did a little analysis earlier this year. Currently in the US, if you take the average amount of time that an American watches television, let's say 5 to 6 hours, the current amount of production of sports that is happening is about 119 times what the average consumer could actually watch. So there is a huge amount of sports that is being put out there. I still think live will be the name of the game, and the big players will remain the big players. And Ed's right; it's a great time if you're a sports fan to see all this niche kind of sports happening. But there's going to be, I think, in some incredible fragmentation as you just sort of have to deal with the fact there's so much content being put out, and we just don't have enough people to watch all of it.
Bob, I'd be curious your take. Obviously, you don't just work with baseball. You deal with a lot of different sports. You just have a big WWE deal. Where do you see sports inventory? Where are we now in the marketplace?
It's not inexhaustible. I agree with Ed, and there's obviously certainly different levels, but I do think what's going to happen, and you're going to see more and more of this, is delivery. You need good content. You need good technology to break through. You just can't put it up and hope they find it. You just can't have great technology and have bad content. So we're watching the development of the marrying the great content with great great technology to see how these people choose to deliver. You mentioned, Richard, WWE. They obviously are going to try and be in every platform and launch a full-time network that's digital. They think for their fans that's a way to reach them, and I would sort of echo what Frank said, that live is still the pinnacle. But the programming is so good, as you know, as ESPN taught us all 30 years ago. The shoulder programming has gotten so good now that fans tune into that with increasing regularity, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that develop that people want to watch and talk about. Sports is what we live with 24 hours a day, and every now and then you get a live event to generate the next 21 hours of content. So I think you're going to see a lot more shoulder programming that people are going to really enjoy and now obviously participate in.
And I think you're going to see how sort of brands play out on that, right? Because there's more and more choice. How do you navigate that choice? What's the technology that helps you navigate, and what are the touchstones that help you get to wherever you want to be, whether it's MLB or Google or ESPN or the Lakers? How are you finding what you want to find, and how is that sourced for you? And sort of in the near term, you've got to put some money on the notion that brands will continue to be attractive as a means of filtering and attracting, in a growing choice world.
Jeannie, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, I think when you talk about shoulder programming, that for when you're dealing with a brand like the Lakers, that was important to us in our rights deal, was that there would be dedicated programming to increase the connection with our fans. And what our previous partners, we were one of the last teams to still be carried over the air broadcast. Our away games were on a CBS affiliate in Los Angeles, and they couldn't end our games fast enough to go right to their local news. They didn't want to do any post-game, any breakdown of the game that you just saw, and that to us was a missed opportunity to engage our fans and be all things Lakers. So on our new channel, the Time Warner Sportsnet RSN, we have things like Backstage Lakers, which is we have cameras traveling with the team on the road, things that people had never seen before. We do a half-hour daily show called The Lake Show, which is all about social media and fans being able to interact with the hosts of the show, and things like that are really important to us. So when you have a brand, You want to be able to have that shoulder programming be reflective of what you're trying to sell, not what is important to perhaps your rights, your media rights holder.
Yeah, I want a Kobe channel where I just basically follow Kobe Bryant around during his entire day. That would be awesome, actually. All right, Jeannie, you sort of led into this. You know, synchronous viewing is starting to become a buzzword in the industry. Second screen features, interviews, behind the scenes stuff, instant replays, interactive prompts, poll questions, game stats. Ed, I'll go back to you. How is everyone preparing for a growth in second screen popularity, and what opportunities do you see there?
Well, I think we're all in it, and I think we're all experimenting a bit. You know, we did the mega cast for the BCS, right? So there you had 6 or 7 screens, lots of different things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, it took our average minute, you know, viewing from 150,000 to over 250,000. So, you know, there's more there going on than just, you know, being able to throw up another, you know, a different camera angle. We tried to sort of take that down to lots of different degrees. I think, generally speaking, it was an interesting test. But I think more of those kinds of things, you know, will continue to be happening. Trying to figure out how to make the second screen experience as complementary as you can, you know, to the first screen, or, you know, bring something additive if that's appropriate, without necessarily, depending upon whether you're the rights holder for the first screen, detracting or adding to how many people are watching that. But listen, we think, you know, it's a rising tide here, and to the extent that, you know, all of us are kind of in the business of looking at extending our opportunities, it's good, and you know, we'll keep after. But I do think we're kind of in the experimental stage, both in terms of what does the content look like, you know, how does it feel, and then, you know, because we're kind of all in business, how do you monetize that? You know, how do you figure that out? And kind of what advantage can you take of the fact that it's essentially real time, a lot of this, so you know exactly how many people are watching, you get a feel for it immediately. You kind of, how do you translate that both in terms of your tools, you know, some analytics about that? How do you figure out how to make that better for your fans, perhaps better for your advertisers, better for your distributors? Those kinds of questions all circle around, you know, the advent of available simultaneous distribution channels.
Yeah, Coach's Film Room. That was a big hit. Bring that back.
People like that one.
Yeah, anecdotally, everybody loved that. Frank, you want to add to that?
Sure. So first off, this is your first screen.
Quit stealing my lines.
The second screen is not necessarily the tablet, the mobile, or whatever. Your second screen actually might be your television or whatever else. So first off, mobile, I think we should that's your first screen. And then as for how we are dealing with it is, we're looking at the sports fan and saying, despite what you see in the media and so forth, how do we complement what these guys are doing, right? Because we're not going to go out and spend the billions they're spending. So how do we help them?
You're not?
No.
Well, I thought this was the rights deal.
Yeah.
We'll get
we can
to
talk
that.
about rights deals in a moment.
I'm coming for Frank next, Bob. Don't worry.
Yeah, I assume that's going to come up. Actually,
All the way up here, there's no rights deal?
Yeah. So, but what I would say that what we do help a sports fan do is I still think the name of the game is live and what's happening right now. But the way the average sports fan consumes sports isn't by just looking at one sport. If you're looking at a paper, for those of you who even do look at papers
Frank
anymore.
dropped the screen.
Yeah, now we're done. For those of you that even do look at papers anymore, you look at a lot of different sports. And so what we're going to try to do is put together an ability for you to see some things that happened 2, 3, 4 days ago, so that when you're watching the current event or you're leading up to the current event, you're as informed as you possibly can be.
Bob.
Yeah, we just don't believe in it. We obviously believe it's the first screen. We build all of our content, you know, from the smallest to the biggest screen first. So we start with the phone, go to the tablet, and go to the PC. It's just the opposite of what we did 4 or 5 years ago. But we don't think synchronous viewing works, flat out. We think that most of our fans want to put 3 things on one screen, not 2 pieces of content not one piece of content on 2 screens.
That's interesting.
And so we're going the other way. We're trying to let them, sort of what Frank was saying, we're, you know, if they want to have it synchronous and they want to watch it on 2 screens, we'll allow them to do that, obviously, and have sort of related content. But most of our fans don't want to do it. They have two different pieces of content going. They might be watching, a football game on TV and a baseball game or a basketball game on their laptop or their phone. And so we plan for that, and we plan that our content has to stand on its own on every screen it is. And our fans would ask, why do I need this to see the same stat, to put it on the damn TV? And so we're going a completely different way. We've always thought that the phone would be dominant in terms of the media interaction with our fans, and that's proved to be the case. So we're not trying to do synchronous viewing, although we allow it, obviously, but our fans, to 80, 90%, they're doing it. Frank says this is their first screen, and the TV is in the background.
Jeannie, how do you think Laker fans want to consume your content?
They want a broad reach, and they want a deep reach. They want to know more about players, of course, Kobe, but they also want to know about the 12th guy and what his life is like. We also have a show that's very popular, The Making of the Laker Girls, and people want to know about the individual girls, what the process is like, and to us, it seems that our fans are insatiable. We have the highest traffic on an NBA team website, and our fans come from all over the world. So we just keep trying to provide fresh content, more information, and let them enjoy the team that they love so much.
All right, Frank. Google has not been a player in live sports rights, but everyone thinks it's coming. How interested is Google in increasing its presence in live sports?
Well, we just bought 4 of the top major leagues yesterday. So
Glad we could be here.
yeah, exactly.
It's a big announcement.
Exactly. No. First off, we believe that live is the name of the game in sports. That's what a sports fan wants to really see. If you're given an opportunity to see your team play live versus go watch something that's catch up or whatever, and you have a limited amount of time, you're going to watch the live game. The interest that we have in bringing live games to YouTube is a bit mixed, in part because there's no YouTube on YouTube. So if we got rights, we'd essentially be turning to someone like Bob or Ed and saying, well, you got to put that on your channel, because we don't have a channel. We don't have a YouTube channel where we program and do editorial and so forth, and there are no plans to do that. So the kind of the rights situation is a little bit of a red herring, in that if you buy a ticket to a game, you've bought rights. Yes, we want live on, and yes, we want to try to encourage leagues to put their games or some aspect of their games on. But the goal right now is less about trying to get an entire network to move over to YouTube than it is to how do you use YouTube to get the large fan base we have right now to go watch what you outside of the YouTube environment are getting paid far more than we right now would pay you.
Bob, you want to follow
That didn't sound good. That did not sound like far more than we want to pay you is a word I've heard before.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've had these discussions with some people on the panel here, and there is a view that, hey, why not just, these are the fees we are getting, flat out, and hey, Google, pay those fees. And the reverse response is, we're not trying to emulate that. We're trying to create really a platform, and a kind of rudimentary way to look at it is, think of how much fees you get for your website. Like the internet people don't come and pay you to put all your highlights on your website. You just do that because it's good for your business. And the challenge for us is to say, you can do something similar on YouTube and have it be very good for your business.
Yeah. All kidding aside, YouTube's an incredibly important channel for all of us. What the relationship is will vary for each league and for each team, but YouTube's like Facebook, like Twitter. I mean, people are there. I mean, and you got to be on that platform. You can't just be device agnostic in today's world. You've got to be platform agnostic. And it may look different on an iPhone than it does on an Android phone. It may look different on YouTube than it does in Twitter, but people are there. And you got to be like Willie Sutton. You got to go where the money is. And so that's where people are. You got to have good things. And I would say this, that, speaking of those three platforms, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, each of them has really been, I think, with sports, and I obviously don't know anything about anything else, barely know anything about sports, but I think with sports, they've been really good about understanding what we're trying to do, what role they're playing. They've had really good business people involved, all three of them, to allow all of us to sort of broaden our reach to their massive audience.
Ed, this is a good question for you, obviously, because of where you work. How much of a game changer would Google entering the live sports rights place? How much of a game changer, if they entered that space, would they be? And how do you think it would impact ESPN or RSNs?
We've faced competitors in terms of rights acquisitions for 30 plus years that we've been in business. It'll happen for the next 30 plus years. If it happens to be Google, then that might be interesting from the perspective of what their plan might be in terms of how they propose to distribute or do with whatever it is they're buying. From the standpoint of just the acquisition activity, having another person at the table trying to bid for popular rights would not be a new phenomenon, by any means. I think that, as we sit today, there are as many as there have ever been in terms of well-heeled potential players and acquirers of sports rights, whether it's us, NBC, Fox, CBS, Al Jazeera, you name it. There's plenty of competition, always has been. It only takes one other. It only takes two people who are interested in the same thing to have it be a spirited acquisition. So I don't think the mere entrance of another potential buyer would be all that significant from a change from where we are now, unless that buyer, as I said before, brought something to the table that was unique or different by way of what they proposed to do with those rights. And we obviously, as a competing potential purchaser, might need to assess that and figure out, okay, if that's attractive to the seller, what do I have to provide, right? Because you're in a value add world. Our value add is to fans, first and foremost. It's to distributors. It's to advertisers. It's to the rights selling community. We're an aggregator, and then we're trying to figure out how we add value to all those folks. A new player in the field might bring something new or different to that you would want to respond to, and that would be interesting. But just more money wouldn't be all that different.
All right, this is, all of you guys can answer this. This was really more directed to Ed and Jeannie, given what they do. Ed, I read a piece you were quoting in the Neiman Journalism Lab, where you're talking about the complexity of sports rights deals. And when you started, they were a page or two or three long.
Yeah.
And now they are hundreds of pages long. I'm sure, Jeannie, you've dealt with this too. For the people out here in this audience who are probably one day going to work on these deals, how complicated are these deals now? Can you give us sort of a sense of what negotiations are like and just how long it takes to actually complete a deal?
Yeah. Well, what used to be able to be done in, a month takes a year. What used to be able to be captured in 30 or 40 pages is 300 or 400 pages now. The complexities are really, I think, the natural evolution of the understanding on the right sellers' parts. I'm interested in making sure they're very careful about identifying what it is they're selling and what you're buying and what the uses may be. Well, take MLB, for example. At the advent of Bob's whole business, then it became a question of, okay, who's going to get what rights, and how do we define what those rights are? How do we define where they start and where they stop? So from the standpoint of if there are lawyers in the audience or business executives are interested in this world, you're looking at how many interesting and unique ways can you divide the pie. So the simplest form of acquisition in our world used to be, and sometimes exists, but it's very rare now. We acquire the rights for all means and media that exist now or may ever exist in the future. That's pretty simple to say. But that doesn't often happen now, and I can tell you, for example, that in our NFL deal, we have a whole exhibit that tries to define, in technological terms, the multiple 10 or 20 devices that we can send something to, different technologies. So that's just mind-bending and takes forever to get through that. So you're seeing that both on the acquisition side and in turn for our business on the distribution side, where we're now having to define in terms of who we're selling to, what they can do with stuff and what rights we're reserving. So it is incredibly complex, but representative of what I think sort of developing and growing business opportunities and the value that sports puts out there in terms of its ability to touch a lot of different places and do it, and you want to do that well.
Jeannie, do you want to add to this? Is this a fun experience for you?
You know, you do it once every 20 years in our case, and so, you know, we signed a 20-year deal, and you can imagine when you're sitting with people, you know, negotiating, spending a lot of time together. Some nights, there was one night we went until 2 a.m., and we brought in masseuses to come and give everybody a back rub during a break.
You make a note of that.
And, you know, and it's you know,
great.
you're sitting across the
Ready to negotiate
table,
with you.
and you know, we're explaining what we're trying to accomplish with our brand, because this is our brand, and now we're turning it over to someone else to, you know, to connect with our fans. They are going to be presenting our product. And you think, okay, you do this deal, sign it, and you know, it's going to go in a drawer and you're never going to have to refer to it. But in our case, one of our biggest concerns is now may become a reality, in that Comcast, with the, you know, taking over of Time Warner, if it passes the industry, you know, guidelines, you know, all of a sudden we may be working with different people who weren't in that room until 2 o'clock in the morning, that understood the flavor of the words we put into this contract. So, you know, it's, I guess, the risk that you take when you make such a long-term deal. But this is, you know, these are the things that keep me up at night. Are we going to have, we've set the bar for our channel, and they've done a phenomenal job in terms of the quality of production, the hiring of talent. But we don't know what will be next if we now become Comcast Sportsnet. And, you know, you got to pull that paper back out and be able to explain, this is why we wrote the deal the way we did, and be able to defend that. And you know, if it doesn't go the right way, then you start counting off the years until your rights fees come up again, and you try to get what you want the next time around.
I think Sloan should give complimentary masseuses to everyone. That'd be sweet. Bob and Frank, I don't want to leave you out. You guys certainly can add your perspective to this, obviously, even though you have different roles.
It's just, it's a long process, and it's right. I mean, the digital emergence has just added a lot of what ifs. But we got lucky. You know, our very first negotiation in terms of selling rights was with ESPN. And they, like everyone else we've dealt with since, are straightforward and honest, and there's no duplicity there. And so while it's complicated, it isn't evil. It's tough, but everyone's professional, and you know, these are interesting negotiations, and people are straightforward with what they want. So in that sense, it's educational. It is a little long, but you don't walk out of there feeling like you walk out of there feeling, I guess Jeannie said the same thing, you walk out of there saying, these are people I want to do business with. Sometimes you do deals, and by the time you're done, you're so exhausted, you don't want to see the people again. You know, that has not been the case. These are really tough issues to solve, and every time you finish, you're glad it's done for that reason, but you're glad you're partners too.
I agree. So in a former life, I negotiated or drafted a lot of these deals, and they are incredibly complicated. But I will say, and as advice to deal makers out there, if you go into a room thinking the other partner is going to screw you over, you're setting yourself up for failure. You've got to go in trusting each other and being willing to say, hey, here are a few things that are really important to me, and here are some things that I don't necessarily care about that much. And you can figure out how to trade. It's not a zero-sum game. And as long as the parties walk out feeling as though the negotiation was fair, you'll have a great relationship.
Added to the complexity is, as Jeannie mentioned, I mean, the length of these deals has begun to really get longer and longer. When I, was first in the business 1,000 years ago, a typical rights deal was, 3 or 4 years, and that was kind of the standard for, a while. Now look at the deals we've done in the last 3 or 4 years. They're all 10, 12, 20-year deals. So if you're going to be living with something for 20 years, you spend a fair amount of time trying to figure out what every sentence means and working it out, because things are going to happen, obviously, in those 20 years that you don't anticipate. But just the length of deals and the risk you're taking with the commitment of that kind of money makes it, makes you want to spend a little bit more time reading it over, so to speak.
This question would normally go to television presidents, but you're all bright people, so I'd like to get your take on it. ESPN President John Skipper said something at this conference 2 years ago that stayed with me. He said that analytics in the media rights space are worthless because media rights are worth what someone will pay. You pay what it costs to buy, and that's that. Of course, we all don't have the bank account of John Skipper, but I wonder, for any of you, if you want to respond, let's go to you, Bob, respond to that thesis. How do you look at risk reward in terms of the cost of media rights? And maybe it's just reward.
I think John Skipper's a great human being.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm sure Ed does too. I'm sure the NBA does too, and probably Google is at some point too. We all love John Skipper. And like everything else, it's true what he says. It's what Ed said earlier. It's two people make a market, and as soon as two people show up, if you own rights, you're all set. But I think I would add. I think John's right. All kidding aside, but I would add to it, and I know firsthand that he does as well, that everyone wants to pay what they want to have the ability to connect with fans better with the rights they just bought. There's a lot of what ifs and unknowns, and you can't really capture it in a monetary way in a contract. The goal is that touched on these unknowns, these 10-year deals, is you want to make sure you can touch your fans, ESPN's fans or our fans, in a way that makes sense for the next 10 years. And so you worry about that. I would liken it to a car. You're paying for the chassis and the engine, and that's what you get the money for. But the fit and finish is why people buy cars. And so that's very important to all of us in the fit and finish. And I think ESPN's been doing a great job at it for a long time, and we've all learned from them. But I think that's what Skipper, if he were here, he would say, on top of that, we want the right to add the extra, the fit and finish to make this thing really move.
Does anybody want to add to that? No?
No, I think that's...
You want to disagree?
No, not at all. Not at all. Look, there's a fair amount of work that obviously goes into all of these from an analysis standpoint, from an evaluation of what you can know about them relative to, sell-throughs, and there's 1,000 things you could look at which get you to a certain point, and then after that, you're in a negotiation. There's some art, there's some science to this, there's positioning in terms of whether you're an incumbent or not an incumbent. So there are many, many factors that go into that conversation. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, someone's making a call as to whether or not what you're buying at the price that it's available provides enough value to you to make it worth your while as an investment, or as an additive to your business, or as a game changer for your business, or as a continuity for your business, wherever your perspective may be. So it's an interesting play, and I think ultimately you're making judgment calls.
So I just want to add one thing.
Please.
I also am a Skipper fan. But I would say in where we are now, it is critical to get data, because it's really helpful if you're trying to direct a sports fan to a particular part of a game or to a particular time frame or whatever, that you have some metadata in which to do it. And to the extent of a long negotiation, where the long negotiation on that point becomes is, if you license metadata to, for example, Google, you don't necessarily want us putting a scoreboard up, but you don't care if we're going to help you improve your search. So that becomes a negotiation. But data is becoming extraordinarily important, with how sports fans consume their content.
Jeannie, did you want to add something?
I was just, in terms of the rights fees, when the Lakers signed their 20-year deal with Time Warner, there was a lot of eyebrows raised, a lot written about the escalating fees and how crazy it is, and that Time Warner would regret it. But in Fortune magazine, when the Comcast Time Warner deal was announced, they talked about one of the feathers in the hat for Comcast would be that they got the Laker rights. So something that everybody said that Time Warner was crazy to pay us what they did, all of a sudden that's one of the valuable assets that Comcast saw in their acquisition or proposed acquisition.
I want the people in this audience to hopefully come away with some takeaways or just some thoughts that they can walk away with when it comes to media rights that may end up helping them as they head forward. So Ed, what's the most challenging thing your brand faces today regarding media rights? And what do you believe will be the most challenging thing you'll face over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I'd prefer to think about as opportunities that we face over the, in the near term in 12 to 24. Given how fast the world is changing, I have no idea what we're going to be looking at in 24 months. But I think the here and now is a bit of what we've been talking about before, which is we have a lot of rights. We've acquired the right to do a lot of things. We've acquired the right to do things in new platforms that are relatively new, untested, interesting, important, no question about it. I think the challenge for us, and an interesting one and a good one, is to kind of think about it from two perspectives. We have the content. When we have the ability to use that content in multiple places, either at the same time or in, over the course of a week or a month or a year, what are we doing there to better serve our fans? How are we managing that content? Sometimes in real time, sometimes after the fact, to provide a compelling viewing, listening, reading, interactive experience, whatever that may be. We have the ability to do that. We've set about many years ago to acquire the rights to be able to do that. Okay, now we have them. What do we do with them from the standpoint of doing what we want to do most, which is serve fans? At the same time, what are we doing to try and make money off of that? How are we looking at the monetization component of all of that work? And how much in real time can we actually do that as well? How can we tailor ads? How can we tailor content? How can we marry up marketing programs with activity in the space as we monitor what people are doing with their first screen or their second screen? Those are real good opportunities, real challenges, I think, for all of us. So I think we're doing that now. I think we'll be better at it in 12 to 24 months, but I sort of view that as kind of one of the more interesting new challenges that we have as a rights owner in terms of what we're looking to do in the months ahead.
Frank?
So one of the challenges that YouTube faces is explaining how 1 billion users that come to the platform, how many of those go watch sports content, right? And as part of that challenge, we are looking at different ways to help curate, discover, et cetera, the content that baseball or ESPN, whatever fans want to see. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge that we have an enormous amount of content related to sports, an enormous ability to assemble that content for a partner. A lot of it is catch-up, so it's not necessarily content that they're particularly monetizing right now. And we've got to figure out, or we are figuring out how to help partners use YouTube to extend their reach, extend their engagement, deepen their relationship with fans, et cetera.
Bob?
Yeah, I think, for us, and this is really narrow to BAM, it's going to be how we, get to be partners with this growing number of people in the digital media space. It was pretty easy 6-7 years ago. People were on the pay TV side or on the digital side, and now everyone's everywhere. That's a real, and to Ed's point, that's a real opportunity. And I'm a big believer that people do deals, not companies. And so it's really going to be to see who emerges, and not to blow more smoke toward ESPN. They've been great partners. They've understood the digital people have to make their money, but fans come first, and so we can enlarge the pie. And that's the model we take to all these other new partners we have and are going to continue to work with as we enlarge the pie, serve the fans, and have a little bit of trust that they should play in the digital space, and maybe we'll play in the sort of the offline space as well. And how that emerges, it'll be interesting to see, and which players do it the best. Well, I think we hope we're part of that discussion and looking forward to it.
Jeannie?
Well, I think that, the strong brands will get stronger, and that, in terms of delivery for content we have to look to our partners in order to get distribution to the way that customers want to enjoy our product, and whether that's mobile, online streaming, whatever it is, we have to stay current.
All right, let's go to questions from the audience here. Some questions for all of you guys. Frank, I didn't even ask you about Sunday Ticket. You should thank me. I was hoping we'd make some news. All right, this is for everybody. How will new television deals affect salary cap implications? Will more revenue sharing equal even more money to the players? Jeannie, we start with you.
Well, the players are our partners, so as more revenue comes in, the cap will go up, as it should. The players are a big driver of the revenue that we're receiving. Revenue sharing, of course, the Lakers are always a contributor in the revenue sharing equation, but it's important in our league to have a even playing field so that all teams can compete and have an opportunity to win a championship. I still think that all things being equal, the Lakers always have an advantage no matter how much revenue sharing there is, just because of the strength of our brand and the basketball front office that we have.
Carmelo Anthony's outside, by the way. Jimmy's waiting for you.
I can't talk about that.
Bob?
You know, we don't have a salary cap in our sport.
That's true.
And obviously, whether you have a salary cap or not, the more revenue there is, invariably it works its way to the people who are, you know, the stars of the game, as you know, it's always worked that way. But I think what Jeannie said is right, is that the job for the commissioners, all of them, is to make sure that on opening day for us, April, or March this year, I guess, is that every fan of every team believes his team or her team can win. And that's the importance of competitive balance. And every league does it differently. Every league may think they're doing it better than the other leagues, but every league is committed to serving the fans in that regard. And so money, the more money there is, and maybe that makes it easier, maybe not. I think it perhaps does in some ways. But that's the number one job of a commissioner, is to make sure that every fan that you have of your great sport, on opening day, your team can win. And I think so. You know, for us, it's as much about a competitive balance as, you know, more money means, you know, everyone makes more money.
Yeah. Frank and I?
So I agree with Bob and Jeannie here. Fans come first, and players deserve to be paid, and you want your team or your fans of your team to think they can win. At Google, it's not really a concern of ours because we're not.
You got 85% of the market.
Yeah, so there you go. So it's
We're really not interested in everybody winning.
but on a different level, what is kind of a concern is I believe everybody is a sports fan. Everybody. It's just a matter of degree. And as these rights get more expensive, and as the players get paid more, and the salaries get higher and higher, we start to question, you know, well, what is that middle American family? What can they afford? And how do you not price yourself out of that? Because those are great fans too, and you want to not have it be so expensive that they can't consume your great sports too.
You good?
I'm good.
All right, we'll start. We'll go back to you then to start. Ed, what are your thoughts on leagues or organizations eventually not passing rights through the traditional channels and deciding to go fully digital?
Well, whether they go fully digital, or you're talking about whether they deal directly, either directly to consumers or in other ways get closer to their ultimate viewers. They've had that opportunity for years. They'll continue to have that opportunity going forward. Ultimately, as I said before, we kind of sit in an interesting place in the middle of all that. So we're an acquirer from MLB, NFL, et cetera. We're a seller to distributors. Our mission is to make sure that we stay relevant, we add value, and we make sure people think that they're better off dealing with us than without us. Right? So there are multiple elements to that. We can pay money, obviously, but we can do more than that. We can promote and build stars. We can help sell merchandise. We can, for colleges, help attract recruits to their programs. We can help corporate sponsors realize their investments on both ends of that equation. So we're trying to make sure that we're staying relevant in all of that, and obviously we're producing programming and content that has, a consistent wow factor that people want to come back and say, ESPN's a place where I'd like to consume my sports in whatever device I'm using to consume it.
Any of you guys can take that. Frank, do you want to?
Go digital. That's it.
Bob?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, every league's had the right to do that, and I think every league is just trying to reach as many fans as we can, but still recognizing we live in a business world. I mean, we're still on planet Earth. And so I think every league, and ironically, or maybe not, the NFL seems to be stepping out more recently. The commissioner's vision got us started first, but everyone's certainly caught up. And so I think they're going to try and nibble at the fringes and maybe take a big step at some point. But no one's going to abandon any TV platform. We still listen to terrestrial radio. No media form dies. And so we're all going to be in every media form we can be, trying to optimize the value, play for the long ball, reach our fans, and make a little bit of money along the way.
Jeannie, I'll direct this to you. How can teams grow their digital and media footprint without cannibalizing their in-stadium audience?
Well, I think it enhances the experience for, are you talking about the ticket buyers that are attending games?
Yeah.
I remember back in the early 80s when at that time when you were a sports owner, you never televised your home games. You only televised your away games because you were afraid if you put your home games on television, no one would ever buy a ticket. And my father launched one of the very first regional sports networks, Prime Ticket, and I remember having a conversation with him at age 21, 22, saying, Dad, this is a huge mistake. We're never going to be able to sell tickets. And he said, what you have to think about is that you're not, you're just expanding the size of the arena. There are fans that don't get a chance to come and see your game live. And by offering them an opportunity to see those games, you're just expanding your audience. So I guess that's the way I would look at it, is that it's an enhancement, not a detriment.
Did you
Yeah, I think you're seeing a tremendous amount of work being done by all the teams in terms of what's our in-stadium experience like, and how can we improve that, whether it's simple a Wi-Fi that works. Seriously. So they've done a lot of things on the creature comforts, the suites and the boxes and the service to the, they want, what's the parking like, the light. They want to make that experience fabulous, right? So, we've all lived through, Frank's too young, but we've all lived, and Jeannie really is too, we've all lived through sort of this migration of,
I mean, what's going on here?
What she was talking about, the fear factor of what's this going to do to my gait as the explosion of television kind of took over. Every game is televised now, so it brings it all the way back, I think, to the local marketing end to make sure that your in-stadium experience is fabulous. And if you can do that, then you're serving that fan really well, and that's what you want to do.
Bob, you can't help yourself. You have to add something here.
Well, I mean, look, you can either master technology or it masters you. There's nothing you can do about it. It's here, particularly the younger generation. I touched on it. We're wiring all our stadiums. They don't want to leave their phone at the door. They've got to use it every which way they can. And I think, I'm biased, but I love every live sporting event. But when you walk into a baseball stadium and you see it, because they are on TV now, and you get to see the experience, you get to see the form, you get to see what it's like, that makes people want to go. They see an experience like second to none. And what Frank said is right. We all worry about the affordability. You want to have Jack Nicholson in the second row, but you want to have the average family somewhere too. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing. I mean, live sports, if we're talking about media rights, is second to none. But going to a live game, going to a live athletic event where you see the best athletes in the world competing, there's nothing that can come close to that. Maybe ballet, maybe theater, but beyond that, I mean, that's it. It's a penultimate.
So I would add to that. It is electrifying to go to a game. It's awesome. It's a little bit of a pain to get to and from the game, especially depending on where you live. But being at the game is incredible. So to the extent that a digital experience can either encourage more people to go to the game or to help people remind themselves that when they go to games, this is what they're either missing out on, or to kind of keep in touch with the team. I think it's complementary.
Yeah, that's well said. And having just come back from the Olympics, I agree with all these guys. There's really nothing like being in a live sporting event, although I would agree the Russians could have done a much better job with Wi-Fi. It was a mess. For Bob and for Ed, there's a question about password sharing on MLB.TV and Watch ESPN. All in all, is this good or is it bad for the business and why? Password sharing.
Password sharing?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think I'm a fan of it. I don't know.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Look, there's a reality of what can be done technically and what people, might or might not do with the, getting availability to something they're not potentially technically supposed to see. We all recognize that there's that. There's out and out piracy, right? So you deal with that as kind of an undercurrent of a lot of what we have to manage. So it's kind of there, and I think at the current time, Bob may have a different point of view. I think it's at a level that's manageable, but cognizant. So you're looking at improving perhaps the technology that can help us with that. Our streaming, we try and sort of, you do things like limit to the number of devices that can be operating at a single time. I recognize there's ways around that. I know that, people are renting out their closets in New York for Slingbox so that somebody in Kansas City can watch whatever. We kind of know that happens, but I think by and large it's not at a level where it's becoming truly problematic, although we all keep our eye on that, testify in Congress periodically, do things here and there, but it kind of is, but not at a level I think where it's becoming a major impediment to our business.
It is with MLB.TV, which is our subscription product. We actually know we have to geolocate people, and we know where they are. And so if we see a certain account being used in 2 different spots routinely, we send an email to the person who bought it and said, pardon us. And so you never want to get into a fight with your customers. And like Ed said, you tolerate a little bit of sticky fingers at the shop, but you don't want to let it get out of hand either. So we look at it pretty carefully. And we had one instance where were 6 people using an account on every day. So we sent an email to that person who happened to be an employee of baseball. So that was, we thought we had better success there than we might otherwise have.
This is for anyone on the panel. How should networks and their partners prepare for the possibility of a la carte service? The idea of only buying the channels that you want. Who would benefit and who would stand to lose if that became an option? Anyone can take that.
Well, we have been at the forefront of this conversation, for a long, long time. That is not a model that we have, embraced. It's not our core business model. We obviously feel that the cable distribution, multi-channel television is a tremendous value as a consumer proposition. If you compare it to almost any other form of entertainment, a single movie, a single ball game, a single ballet, you'll rapidly come to realize that from the standpoint of the price point of what that product offers, it's really very good. Anyone who's analyzed a la carte, and many of you here are analytical, so any Wall Street firm, any academic review of a la carte has generally suggested that what people think it will deliver, which is choice at a much lower price, simply isn't going to work out that way, and essentially most people will pay more and get less. Having said that, we recognize that there's a proliferation of platforms. We're trying to feed into those platforms, and ESPN certainly has been we've always been platform agnostic and looked to embrace any new technology that came along. So whether it was HDTV, whether it was make sure we were on the first apps, when over-the-top television comes, I expect that we will be a part of that because we want to be wherever our fans can consume sports. And if that proposition turns out to be something different from a consumer experience, either in terms of quality, quantity, or price, then the people who are in that business will be the ones that figure that out, and consumers will vote yes or no with their pocketbook. So I think the system that exists today is a good one from the standpoint of serving the needs of sports fans in our view, and a la carte is not an improvement over what we have today.
Did anyone else want to add to that?
So we take a slightly different view, but let's start with the concept of having a bundled product where you have a subscription plus ad revenue is great and is not going away. The issue is whether the bundle that cable is creating or the current bundles being offered to you is what you want. And take a look at the paper. Look at the Sunday Times. That's an amazing bundle of content. And how many of you actually buy it? Like literally buy the 550 thing. It's because you're now on your devices, you're doing other things. So the way we see it kind of coming together is there will be a la carte, but entities like ESPN, BAM, the Lakers, they'll form bundles that currently exist anyway and present a better deal to the consumer. Because Ed's right, if you try to buy an ESPN on a purely a la carte basis, it's way too expensive. But maybe there's one or two that would want to do it. By and large, you just create the bundles that you think fans want.
All right, we got 1 minute left. So any of you can take this. This will be the last question. And we covered this a little bit, but how do long-term media rights contracts deal with the rapid technology advancement and appearance of new media platforms? And Ed, you sort of hit on this a little bit, I think, just in that you don't know what's coming, but you know things are coming.
You know they're coming, so you try to anticipate as best you can. From a rights acquisition standpoint, you obviously try and buy the broadest possible statement of rights that you can. And if you're in the rights selling business, you're trying to make sure you understand what it is you're licensing, what you might want to retain for yourself, and and everybody's trying to figure out what the value of that is.
Anybody want to follow up on that? 30 seconds? You're all talked out. All right, thank you very much. This has really been an excellent panel. Jeannie, Bob, Frank, Ed, and thank you very much for being here.